The airport terminal was packed, a restless tide of travelers moving through the sleek, fluorescent-lit space. Among them was Isabel Carter, her sharp gaze locked onto the departure screen as she adjusted the cuff of her tailored blazer. She moved with effortless confidence, her heels clicking against the polished floor, radiating the kind of presence that made people unconsciously step aside. She didn't look like a billionaire. That was by design. No flashy designer logos, no entourage, just a woman who knew exactly where she was going. At gate 22, a line of business-class passengers waited to board. Isabel slid her boarding pass across the scanner. The gate agent, barely glancing up, waved her through. Inside the aircraft, the air smelled of leather and fresh coffee. The first-class cabin exuded quiet luxury, plush seats, dim ambient lighting, the soft murmur of attendants offering champagne. Isabel found her seat, 2A, and set down her briefcase with precise ease. That's when she felt it. A shift, a presence, someone standing too close. She looked up. A flight attendant, tall, blonde, early 40s, was staring down at her with pursed lips. The kind of look that wasn't outright hostile, but carried a very specific message. You don't belong here. Ma'am, the attendant's voice was clipped, professional, but just barely. This section is for first-class passengers only. The words landed like a cold slap. Isabel blinked once, twice, then, slowly, deliberately, she tilted her head. Her voice was smooth, unreadable. I am a first-class passenger. A pause. The attendant's eyes flickered toward Isabel's outfit. A crisp, dark suit, simple but expensive, no obvious labels. Then her gaze dropped to the briefcase. A moment of hesitation. She was recalibrating, reassessing. Isabel had seen it before. The internal struggle. The moment people decided whether to treat her as a peer or an inconvenience. I'll need to see your boarding pass, the woman said finally, her tone a fraction sharper. Isabel held her gaze. Then with the same deliberate precision, she reached into her case, pulled out the neatly folded document, and extended it. The attendant barely glanced at it. She didn't take it. Her lips thinned. I'm going to need you to move to the back. Silence. A shift in the cabin. A few heads turned. Someone 2 rows back glanced up from his laptop. Isabel's fingers curled slightly around the edge of her boarding pass. Not out of nervousness, out of calculation. She could feel the weight of every set of eyes in the room, the moment stretching, the unspoken assumption simmering beneath it all. She exhaled. I'm sorry, Isabel said, her voice cool, measured. But this is my seat. A flicker of something crossed the attendant's face. Annoyance. This section, she repeated, slower this time, as if Isabel didn't understand English, is reserved for our premium customers. There it was. The edge, the arrogance, the quiet implication. The words hung between them, thick with meaning. A heat burned low in Isabel's stomach. Not anger. Something colder, sharper. She straightened. I believe my ticket qualifies me as a premium customer. A beat of silence. Then for the first time, the attendant's mask cracked. Something dark passed over her expression. Frustration? Embarrassment? Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. A younger flight attendant, brunette, mid-20s, hovering awkwardly by the galley, spoke hesitantly. Megan? She glanced at Isabel, then back at the senior attendant. Her ticket checks out. A muscle in Megan's jaw tightened. I'm handling this, she snapped. The younger woman flinched. By now, the tension was palpable. The man in 3C put down his newspaper. Someone in 1A subtly angled their phone. Megan's voice dropped. Ma'am, she said tightly, I need you to move or I'll have to call security. And there it was, the shift from subtle to explicit, from condescension to outright threat. Isabel's breath was steady. She was used to boardrooms full of men who underestimated her, executives who assumed she was the assistant, not the CEO. This was nothing new. She just hadn't expected it here, at her airline. She adjusted her posture, her expression betraying nothing. Then do what you have to do. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in Megan's eyes, a hint of doubt. She opened her mouth. Then, a voice, male, firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. What's the problem here? A middle-aged man in a navy blazer, business class, maybe a lawyer, was watching them now. His gaze flicked between Isabel and Megan. The moment stretched. Megan exhaled sharply through her nose. Then without another word, she spun on her heel and stalked toward the front of the plane. The younger attendant, Emily, her name tag read, gave Isabel a quick, apologetic look before hurrying after her. The tension in the cabin lingered. A few more whispers, a few more side glances. Isabel exhaled, rolling her shoulders back. She had spent years building a company from the ground up, years proving herself in a world that rarely made space for women like her. This wasn't over. She wasn't sure how yet. But this was just the beginning. The hum of the aircraft engines filled the cabin, a low, steady vibration that contrasted sharply with the tension hanging in the air. Isabel didn't move. She stayed perfectly still in her seat, her gaze fixed forward, but she was acutely aware of every glance, every hushed whisper from the rows behind her. Megan, the senior flight attendant, stood at the front of the cabin, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, speaking in hushed but agitated tones to another crew member. Isabel caught glimpses of sharp hand gestures, the stiffness of her posture. Megan was seething, but she was also calculating. Isabel had seen that look before, a person caught in their own mistake, grasping for a way to twist the situation in their favor. The younger attendant, Emily, shifted uncomfortably near the galley, her eyes darting toward Isabel before looking away just as quickly. She wanted no part in this. The plane taxied to the runway. Isabel exhaled slowly. A confrontation like this, one that had unfolded in front of so many witnesses, couldn't be ignored. Megan knew it. The other passengers knew it. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight crew, prepare for takeoff." The cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling the transition. Isabel tightened her seatbelt. She felt the plane surge forward, the engines roaring louder as they lifted off the ground. She let her head rest against the seat, her eyes closed just for a moment. She wasn't angry, not in the way Megan probably assumed. She was thinking. By the time the plane leveled out, the seatbelt sign flicking off with a soft chime, she had already decided how this would play out. Megan returned, moving through the aisle with forced politeness, a tray in hand. She stopped at Isabel's row, her face stiff. "Would you like a drink?" Her voice was clipped, her fingers tightening on the tray's edge. "Water," Isabel said evenly. Megan set the glass down harder than necessary. The water sloshed slightly. Isabel didn't react. She simply reached out, steadied the glass, and met Megan's gaze with an expression so composed it was almost a mirror. Megan lingered for half a second as if expecting a reaction. When she didn't get one, she turned and moved on. Across the aisle, the man in the navy blazer watched carefully. His expression was unreadable, but Isabel could tell. He had been in enough boardrooms to recognize a power struggle when he saw one. The hum of conversation around the cabin grew as passengers settled into the flight. Isabel reached for her briefcase, retrieving a notepad and pen. She wasn't a fan of using her phone mid-flight. She preferred to think without distractions. She began making notes, not just about Megan, but about everything. How had this happened? How had someone like Megan lasted in a customer-facing role? Had there been complaints about her before? If Isabel had faced this treatment today, then others had too. She was deep in thought when she felt movement nearby. Emily, the younger flight attendant, hesitated at her side. "Ma'am," she said quietly. Isabel looked up. Emily's hands were clasped together tightly. She glanced toward the front of the cabin, then back to Isabel, her voice dropping. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." For a moment, Isabel didn't respond. She studied the girl, noting the nervous tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the hem of her uniform. "You don't have to apologize," Isabel said finally. "You weren't the one at fault." Emily hesitated, then nodded. Still, it wasn't right. Isabel tapped her pen against the page of her notebook. She could tell Emily was young, probably still in her early 20s, someone who wanted to do the right thing, but was caught under someone else's authority. "You're new, aren't you?" Isabel asked. Emily blinked, then gave a small nod. "Just under a year." That explained a lot. Megan was the kind of person who thrived on power plays, and Emily was an easy target. "Do you like it?" Isabel asked. Emily hesitated, then quietly, "I did. Before today." Isabel exhaled through her nose. "There are a lot of good people in this industry," she said. "People who want to make it better." She closed her notebook and met Emily's gaze. "The trick is knowing when to speak up." Emily swallowed hard, nodding. Then, before she could say anything else, Megan's voice cut through the air from the front of the cabin. "Emily, we're about to begin meal service." The words were sharp, edged with impatience. Emily flinched, then straightened. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to leave, but not before casting one last glance at Isabel, something unreadable in her expression. Isabel watched her go. She glanced down at her notes. This wasn't over, not even close. The scent of reheated meals filled the cabin as the flight attendants moved through the aisles, distributing dinner trays with rehearsed efficiency. Isabel barely noticed. She sat perfectly still, fingers tapping lightly against the leather cover of her notebook. She wasn't thinking about the meal service. She was thinking about Megan. Megan, who still moved with that unshaken arrogance, as if what had happened earlier had already been erased. As if she had won. That was Megan's mistake. Across the aisle, the man in the navy blazer was watching again. Not obviously, just occasional glances over the rim of his glass. He was waiting, curious, maybe wondering if she would let it go. She wouldn't. The plane rattled slightly as it hit mild turbulence. Passengers adjusted their trays, some murmuring to each other. Megan's voice carried through the cabin. "It's just a small patch, folks, perfectly normal." A forced smile. Perfectly normal. Isabel glanced toward the galley. Emily was there, dutifully stacking used trays, her shoulders tense as Megan spoke. There was something deliberate in Megan's movements, the way she reached past Emily, barely acknowledging her. It wasn't just Isabel. Megan had made a career out of making people feel small. Isabel flipped open her notebook and started writing. Name, incident, witnesses, every detail, every subtle moment she could remember from the past hour. Pattern of behavior, prior complaints, investigate. Then she circled one sentence. How many people has she done this to? Because this wasn't the first time. People like Megan didn't start with billionaires. They started small, passengers who wouldn't push back, employees who needed the job. A low voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You're handling this well." Isabel looked up. The man in the navy blazer had leaned slightly toward her, his tone casual but knowing. She didn't respond immediately, just studied him. He looked like a corporate guy, law, maybe finance. Sharp, methodical, the type to notice things others missed. Finally, she closed her notebook. "I've had practice." He smirked slightly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Yeah, I figured." A pause. "Are you planning to say something when we land?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer, but he nodded as if she already had. "Good." He leaned back, eyes returning to his drink. "People like that don't stop unless someone makes them." Isabel turned her attention back to the front of the cabin. Megan was speaking to another passenger, her demeanor smooth, collected. But Isabel saw it now, the performance. She wasn't being polite. She was controlling, calculating exactly how much she could push before facing consequences. This flight would land soon enough, and when it did, there would be consequences. She just hadn't decided how big yet. The soft chime of the intercom signaled the captain's announcement. His voice was calm, professional, informing passengers they were beginning their descent. Isabel barely heard him. Her focus remained locked on Megan, who moved through the cabin with the same false politeness, the same forced smile as if nothing had happened. Isabel's fingers drummed lightly against the edge of her tray table. She wasn't angry. She was assessing, calculating. Every second that passed built toward a decision. Across the aisle, the man in the navy blazer glanced at her again. He knew. He was waiting. Megan approached with final drink refills, her expression neutral, but Isabel could see it. The tightness around her eyes, the small tension in her jaw. Megan knew too. She just wasn't sure how bad this would get for her yet. She placed a glass on Isabel's tray, just a little too hard. The water trembled. "Anything else, ma'am?" Her voice was flat. Isabel let a beat of silence stretch between them before answering. "No, I'm fine." Megan hesitated, as if expecting more. When nothing came, she straightened and moved down the aisle, her posture rigid. The captain spoke again. "Flight crew, prepare for landing." Emily moved quietly past, collecting last-minute trash. She barely glanced at Isabel, but when she did, there was something different in her expression. Anticipation. As the plane descended, Isabel settled into her seat, watching the city lights blur beneath them. Her decision was made. The tires met the runway with a soft thud, the familiar weight pressing them down as the plane slowed. Around her, passengers shifted, stretching, murmuring about connections and luggage. Megan moved to the front of the cabin, speaking into the intercom. "Welcome to New York. We'll be taxiing for a few more minutes. On behalf of the crew, we thank you for choosing to fly with us." Isabel exhaled slowly, then reached for her briefcase. It was time. The moment the plane reached the gate and the seatbelt sign flicked off, Megan turned, already in motion to exit first. But Isabel was faster. She stood, stepping forward with effortless precision, cutting off Megan's path just before the cockpit door. Megan froze. A flicker of panic crossed her face just for a second. The cabin was still. The other passengers hadn't started moving yet. Isabel smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't aggressive. It was something else entirely. "You'll be staying here," Isabel said quietly. "We need to talk." Megan opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she knew, and so did Isabel. Megan's breath hitched for just a fraction of a second, but she masked it quickly. She glanced toward the cockpit as if expecting someone to intervene, but the pilots were still running post-flight checks. No one was coming to save her. The other passengers were beginning to stir, unbuckling seatbelts, stretching stiff limbs, pulling bags from the overhead compartments. The usual impatient shuffle of people eager to leave the plane. They weren't paying attention yet, but they would. Megan squared her shoulders. "Ma'am, if you'd like to discuss something, I can refer you to customer service." Her voice was sharp, but there was something beneath it now. Hesitation. Isabel tilted her head slightly, watching her. Megan was good. She had rehearsed this act for years, maintaining control, keeping people in their place. But this wasn't some random passenger she could intimidate into compliance. Isabel let the silence stretch between them, just long enough to unsettle Megan further. Then with absolute calm, she said, "No, Megan, you and I are going to talk, right now." Something flickered in Megan's eyes. Panic? No, not yet. But the cracks were starting to show. Emily lingered a few feet away, pretending to check the galley supplies, but Isabel could see it. The way she was listening, the way she held her breath. Megan's jaw clenched. She took a step back, toward the jet bridge door, but Isabel didn't move. She didn't have to. Then the man in the navy blazer cleared his throat. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was casual, but his expression wasn't. He was watching Megan carefully, measuring. Other passengers were looking now. A few had paused their movements, sensing something unusual. Megan exhaled sharply, then forced a smile. "Of course not." She turned back to Isabel. "Ma'am, if you'd like to file a complaint, you're welcome to. I own this airline." The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. Isabel said them with the same calm detachment she used in boardrooms when closing billion-dollar deals. Megan stopped mid-sentence. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost fascinating to watch. Emily inhaled sharply. The man in the navy blazer blinked, then, just barely, smirked. Silence. A new kind of silence. Megan's lips parted, but no words came out. She blinked rapidly, as if her brain was still trying to process the information. What? It came out weaker than she intended. Isabel stepped forward, closing the distance between them just enough. Not threatening, just final. "You heard me," Isabel said. "I own this airline, which means I own this plane, and you—" Her voice didn't change, didn't waver. "Work for me." Megan actually swayed. Emily was frozen in place, her eyes darting between them. Passengers were staring now. Someone had pulled out a phone. Recording. Megan's mouth opened and closed, her brain scrambling for a response. But what could she say? What excuse could possibly fix this? "You discriminated against a passenger," Isabel continued, her voice still impossibly even. "You attempted to remove me from my seat, a seat I paid for. You humiliated yourself in front of witnesses, and now you're going to face the consequences." Megan panicked. Isabel saw it happen in real time, the moment Megan realized there was no way out. She knew what was coming, and for the first time since this flight began, she was afraid. Megan's face drained of color, her throat working as she struggled to find a response. The usual arrogance, the thinly veiled condescension, it was gone. In its place was something raw, something she had spent years avoiding: accountability. The murmur of passengers grew louder. Isabel could feel their attention, the weight of their curiosity pressing in. Someone had definitely started recording. This wasn't just a quiet conversation anymore. It was an event. Megan's lips parted. A reflex. She was going to deny it. She was going to argue like she always had, talk her way out of it, turn it around. But then her eyes flicked to the man in the navy blazer, to Emily, to the passengers still watching, waiting. She realized there was no out. Her jaw tensed. "Ma'am," she started, her voice tight. "I don't," Isabel said. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forceful, but it stopped Megan cold. Isabel took a slow breath, exhaling evenly. "I don't want excuses. I don't want apologies. I don't even want an explanation." She tilted her head slightly. "I want to know, how many times have you done this before?" Megan's fingers twitched at her sides. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Recognition, because they both knew. This wasn't the first time. Isabel let the silence stretch. Megan shifted, uncomfortable. She hesitated, then steeled herself. I don't understand what you're implying. Isabel gave a small, knowing nod. Right, because it's just so strange for a flight attendant to assume a paying customer doesn't belong in first class. She arched a brow. Coincidence, I'm sure. Megan swallowed hard. Emily, still frozen nearby, finally spoke. There have been complaints before. Her voice was quiet but steady. She met Isabel's gaze, and for the first time, there was something else there. Resolve. Megan's head snapped toward her. Emily, no! Isabel's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Megan stopped mid-sentence, her mouth still open, shoulders tight. Isabel turned to Emily. Tell me. Emily hesitated, not out of doubt but fear, and that was enough. She had been afraid before today. I don't have access to reports, Emily admitted, fingers tightening against the hem of her uniform. But I've heard passengers complain. Some have even requested reassignment. They never go anywhere. Isabel nodded slowly. That made sense. An incident here, a complaint there, small enough for corporate to ignore, small enough for Megan to keep doing it. She turned back to Megan, who was seething now, but too rattled to fight back. Isabel's voice was calm, almost conversational. You thought this would be just another flight, just another passenger you could intimidate. A small pause. That was a mistake. Megan's breath was shaky. What are you going to do? The fact that she was even asking meant she knew. Isabel smiled, just barely. You'll find out soon. Megan stood frozen, her breathing uneven. The confident, domineering flight attendant from earlier was gone. Now, she was just waiting for a verdict she already knew was coming. Passengers were still watching. The tension in the cabin had shifted, from quiet curiosity to something heavier, anticipation. They knew they were witnessing something rare, a person who had always gotten away with things finally facing the moment she couldn't escape. Isabel didn't rush. She let the silence stretch, let Megan feel it. Let her realize that this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. Then, finally, she spoke. When we land, you'll be met by a representative from corporate, Isabel said. Her voice wasn't cruel, wasn't angry. It was simply final. You'll answer for what happened here today, and for anything else that comes up when we thoroughly review your record. Megan's fingers twitched at her sides. Her lips pressed into a thin line like she wanted to argue, but she didn't, she couldn't. Because this time, it wasn't just one passenger's word against hers. There were witnesses, there were videos, and most importantly, there was power behind the complaint. Emily took a small step back, as if distancing herself from the wreckage of Megan's career. The man in the navy blazer exhaled, shaking his head slightly. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. Megan's eyes darted toward him, then toward the phone still recording a few rows back. She suddenly looked small. Not the towering presence she had been at the beginning of the flight, just a woman who had played her game too many times and finally lost. The door to the cockpit opened. The captain stepped out, glancing between them, brow furrowed. Is there a problem? Isabel didn't look away from Megan. No, she said simply. We're just finishing up here. And with that, she turned. The conversation was over. The cabin door opened and the energy inside the plane shifted. Passengers gathered their belongings, eager to leave, but their eyes still flickered toward Isabel and Megan. They had witnessed something rare, justice, immediate and undeniable, and no one wanted to miss the final moment. Megan hesitated, gripping the edge of a seat for balance. Her breathing was shallow, her expression unreadable. She wasn't pleading, not yet, but Isabel could see it, the rapid-fire calculations running through her mind. Could she recover? Could she twist this? Could she survive this? She couldn't. A uniformed airline representative was already waiting just outside the jet bridge. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, the kind of corporate handler who had seen everything. His gaze locked onto Megan instantly. He knew who he had come for. Isabel stepped forward first, barely sparing Megan a glance. She wasn't the problem anymore. She was handled. The representative nodded at Isabel with professional caution. Miss Carter, he greeted, we're prepared to discuss this matter immediately. Isabel adjusted the strap of her bag. I assumed you would be. Behind her, Megan took a sharp breath, her final moment of freedom. Then reluctantly she followed. Passengers parted to let them through, the silence saying more than words ever could. As Isabel stepped into the jet bridge, She heard a whisper behind her. "Emily." "Thank you," she murmured, just loud enough. Isabel didn't stop, didn't turn, but a small, knowing smile flickered across her lips. Because Emily wasn't thanking her for getting Megan fired. She was thanking her for proving it was possible. The walk through the jet bridge was silent. Megan trailed a few steps behind Isabel, her breathing sharp and uneven. She wasn't speaking anymore. Maybe she finally understood there was nothing left to say. At the end of the corridor, the airline representative led them into a private lounge. It was a quiet, glass-walled space designed for VIP clients and high-profile situations, exactly like this one. Inside, two more corporate officials were waiting. One, a woman in a dark suit, was already flipping through a file. The other, an older man, simply watched Megan with an unreadable expression. The door closed. The air felt thick. "Miss Carter," the woman began, looking at Isabel, "we appreciate your time. We take incidents like this very seriously." Isabel placed her briefcase on the table, but didn't sit. "I hope so," she said. Megan finally spoke. "This has been blown out of proportion," she said quickly. "I was doing my job. There was a misunderstanding." The man held up a hand, silencing her. "We've already reviewed the footage." Megan froze. The woman in the suit didn't even look up. "There were multiple recordings from passengers, and based on what we've seen, there's no misunderstanding." She flipped a page. "This isn't your first complaint, Miss Harris. It's just the first one you couldn't bury." Megan stiffened. She opened her mouth, to argue, to beg, to fight, but the corporate officials weren't interested. They had already decided. "You're being placed on immediate leave," the woman continued. "Pending final review, termination is likely." Likely, which meant certain. Megan knew it too. Her face barely held together, but Isabel saw it. The cracks, the collapse underneath. The man in the navy blazer had been right. People like Megan didn't stop until someone made them, and today was that day. Megan didn't move. She didn't blink. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Immediate leave. Termination likely. For the first time since this flight began, she looked small. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, her fingers curling against the arms of the chair. She wanted to argue. Isabel could see it. The desperate scramble for an excuse, an escape, but there wasn't one. Not this time. The woman in the suit closed the file. "You'll receive further communication from HR," she said briskly. "Until then, you're not authorized to board another flight as a crew member." Megan flinched. Her entire world, the control she had clung to, was gone in a matter of minutes. Isabel remained silent, watching. She wasn't here for revenge. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to make sure. Megan sucked in a breath. "Is this really necessary?" Her voice was uneven now. "I've worked for this airline for over 15 years. And in that time," the man cut in, "you've had at least a dozen formal complaints. Most of them never made it past internal review." He folded his hands. "But this one did." Megan's eyes flickered, panic, disbelief, anger, before she finally looked at Isabel. "You set me up," she accused, voice shaking. "You wanted this." Isabel tilted her head slightly. "No, Megan," she said calmly. "You did this to yourself." Silence. Megan's face crumpled. The weight of everything finally settled onto her shoulders. The officials stood. "You'll be escorted out," the woman said firmly. "We'll be in touch." A uniformed security officer stepped forward. Megan stiffened, her pride barely holding together as she rose to her feet. And then just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. Isabel exhaled. The woman in the suit turned to her. "Miss Carter, thank you for bringing this to our attention." Isabel met her gaze. "Make sure it doesn't happen again." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "We will." And this time, Isabel believed it. The air in the private lounge felt lighter. The tension that had pressed against Isabel's chest since the start of the flight had finally eased. Megan was gone, not just from this room, not just from this moment, but from the power she had wielded over people for far too long. But Isabel wasn't done yet. She turned to the corporate officials. "What are you going to do about the rest of it?" The woman in the suit blinked. "Excuse me?" "This wasn't an isolated incident," Isabel said evenly. "You just admitted there were prior complaints. So tell me, how did she keep her job for 15 years? The man shifted uncomfortably. "We will be conducting a full review of our oversight processes." Isabel exhaled slowly. Typical corporate answer. "That's not enough." Her voice wasn't sharp, but it was final. "Passengers shouldn't have to go viral for you to take action. Your employees shouldn't be afraid to report someone like her. You don't just have a Megan problem. You have a culture problem. The room went silent. The woman hesitated, then nodded. We understand, and we're prepared to take real steps. Isabel studied her for a moment, then finally spoke. Good. She picked up her briefcase. She had gotten what she came for, but as she turned to leave, a voice stopped her. Miss Carter. Emily. She stood near the door, shifting slightly, her hands gripping the edge of her uniform. I wanted to say thank you. Isabel held her gaze. You already did, Emily swallowed. I know, but I've seen people like her get away with it before. I didn't think it would ever change. Isabel gave her a small, knowing smile. It just did. Emily nodded, her shoulders squaring for the first time. As Isabel stepped into the terminal, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had already changed everything. The airport was alive with movement. Travelers hurrying to their gates, families reuniting, the constant murmur of voices blending with the distant crackle of announcements. Isabel moved through it effortlessly, the hum of activity barely registering. She had done what she came here to do. Megan was gone. The company had no choice but to fix its policies. And employees like Emily? They finally had proof that standing up for what was right mattered. But something still lingered in her mind. She glanced at her watch. There was a board meeting in the morning, emails waiting to be answered. She should be thinking about that. Instead, she found herself replaying the moment Megan realized she had lost. Not just her job, her power. A voice pulled her back to the present. Miss Carter? She turned. The man in the navy blazer. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, studying her with something between curiosity and admiration. I figured I'd see you again, he said. She arched a brow. Did you? He smirked. I had a feeling you weren't the type to just let things go. Isabel exhaled, shaking her head. No, I'm not. A pause. A flicker of something unspoken between them. Then, you made the right call, he said. Not just for yourself. For everyone who's ever had to deal with people like her. Isabel held his gaze. That was the real win. She could have let it go, could have ignored Megan, moved to another seat, taken the easy way out. But she didn't. And because of that, something had changed. Not just for her, but for people she would never even meet. She gave the man a small, knowing smile. Thanks for the reminder. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving behind not just the flight, not just the fight, but an industry that would never be the same again.